Thank you all for showing up this morning, or this afternoon. It's afternoon where you are. It's still morning here for me. But I'm still happy that you're here. We're going to talk about some resources to support faculty in higher education programs. And this is in connection to the Faculty Toolbox product that'll be available someday soon on the FCSUA website. Okay, so my agenda for this session is to talk about the Faculty Toolbox purpose, what the contents are in it, and then go to concerns or questions that you might have as program providers that you want answered, or as best I can answer them in the Faculty Toolbox, okay? The other part that you need to know is that I am really comfortable with people asking questions as I go along. And so I'll just ask Chris and Janice to tell me when there's a question or jump in when there's a question so that I can answer it in context, because that makes better sense to me than waiting until the end, okay? Is that all right, Janice? Okay, all right.
Yes, fine with me.
Okay, cool. So it seems that every time we had one of these institutes or mid-year check-in connects, that there were requests from different programs for ideas for supporting faculty in the different IHE programs across the whole center. So those that are career tech, those that are at community colleges or state colleges, and those that are private universities or state universities, they all had questions about what do we do about faculty? And you know, that's basically the question that they would ask. So it wasn't very specific. The toolbox and this presentation are to allow us to unearth some of those concerns so that we can answer or provide some questions. And what we know from how these programs are developed is that initially the focus of programs shift over time. So initially they're focused on programmatic elements like, a handbook and policy and procedure and applications and la-da-da-da-da. Eventually, once those things are coordinated or those things are developed, then the shift goes toward, well, how do we engage faculty and staff in the program to sustain the program in our institution? So it's the time now, at 5 years into this grant, to start thinking about the faculty and the staff support that might be needed, because programs have developed some of those permanent policy issues or things. The good thing about this toolkit is that the intent is to look at different IHE environments and think about the resources that might be needed in different settings. For example, CTEs, programs that offer career or technical certificates, industry-related certificates, have different restrictions and parameters placed on them when we talk about accommodations and modifications. So how do you approach that with that faculty? How do you do that at a university where they're not used to accommodating anybody for anything except for those through disability or access services? And the toolkit, from my perspective, access the best research and the best current practices that I could find, or that the reviewers within the center could lead me to give a rounded picture or a full picture of the supports available. That's the purpose. So what does it look like? It'll be housed on the FCSUA website or similar to the one that Chris did with the family supports. So to that end, your input is needed in order for me to be sure that I'm meeting the needs of the constituents. The other part of the toolkit is that it's connected to the online team planning tools, so that it looks at the benchmarks 2.1 through 2.4. Those are all the elements within the planning tool that relate to instruction and faculty support and access on the campus or in various environments. So when you eventually are able to access the toolkit, you'll see connections to these benchmarks there, so that when you're working on those benchmarks, you can go and look at that toolkit and say, oh, here's some ideas I hadn't thought about, or, oh yeah, we tried that, that didn't work. Let's see if there's something else. Just trying to make it a little more user-friendly and much more directed to the planning tool. So the first component, or the first topic within the toolkit, is the area of awareness. So Danny, because you thought that we were going to have the whole toolkit done, I'm apologizing to you as well as to everyone else. No, we don't have it done, but I did upload in the handout area a document that's divided into each of these categories: awareness, instruction, and universal design for learning, that has resources that will appear in the toolkit. And there'll be others. There are many others as well, but there's some initial information. So I'm saying Danny because she and I chatted about it this morning, and she reacted. She was so disappointed that I wasn't going to share with you the toolkit right now.
That's a good thing, though. We're just excited for it.
Well, that's a nice way to put it. You sounded very disappointed.
I'm sorry.
Mary Lou, if you want to, go ahead and put your PowerPoint in the chat. You can do that you were sharing, or I can get it from you later and we'll put it in at the end. Okay.
Okay, I'll do it as I go on, because
yes,
I talk with my hand, so that means I can't use my other hand.
I got you. Thank you.
To find anyway, nevertheless. All right, so the first topic is awareness. And in looking at the research, and I found this great book. I'm going to see if I can get it because it's holding up my computer. So hang on. All right, so I'm showing you the book. I can't tell if you can see it or not because I can't see my own face. Let's see. All right. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Okay, so here's this book. You can't see it. All right, I'll tell you what the book says. The book says, Creating Inclusive Learning Opportunities in Higher Education. And yes, I will put it in the chat box. And it's by Cheryl Bergstaller. It's a fabulous, brandy spanking new, like 2020 edition of Bergstaller's book on higher education and how to increase diversity in the way that we teach and present information to students. So it doesn't necessarily say this is for IHEs that have programs for students with intellectual disabilities, but you can read that all the way through it. You can say, oh yeah, this is a good idea. This is a good way to think about it. And lots of the resources came from this book or directed me to it in one way or the other. So I'm not selling this book, but you should look into it for a program reference. Okay, so that's my story on that thing. So the first step in setting awareness is to be sure that when you're talking with faculty and staff who are not a member of your program, so that's who we're focusing on. We're focusing on faculty and staff who are outside of the program. They could be those folks in the police department. They could be the faculty member who teaches a sociology class that your students are in, or they could be in the Safe Serve or Serve Safe certificate program in a culinary. Explain to them what the big picture is about why the program is on this campus. That's the first thing that they need to understand is why are they here? You can hit them with the legal reasons. You can hit them with oh, we need to do this because it's part of the diversity plan for the college. You can do that, but that's not necessarily the kindest way to go about it. Being hit over the head with legalities is not a friendly way to start the discussion about why people should be supportive of a program for students with intellectual disabilities. You should also though consider the idea that there are things on campus that are parallel in a way to an IHE program for students with IDD, like accessibility services. They provide similar sorts of supports for a different group of individuals with disabilities or a different diverse group. So connecting with that, saying that this already exists, is a friendlier, logical way to rationalize the big picture of the program. The second step is to create sensitivity, and I found it really interesting in my research was that, you know, I come from a special ed background where I taught in high schools, I've taught in college, at a community college, and we did more simulations about disabilities. You know, like, what's it like to be learning disabled? What's it like to have cataracts? You know, all that kind of stuff. And I learned that those are not necessarily the best way to get the information across. Great, so I've spent part of my life doing useless things. Okay, so what the research and what Bergstahler in particular kept reiterating, the Do It program at the University of Washington also talked about it, is that having a panel of experts as a way to create sensitivity was much more effective. And so a panel of experts would be people who have different types of disabilities talking about how they in particular overcome or deal with the barriers to education. Let me close this one. The third step is to plan for ongoing support. So that means once you do the introduction to disabilities to the whole campus or to a department, that's not the end. You need to go back over it and over it and over it every time you get new faculty or new staff. It might be in the form of monthly newsletters, it might be professional development series or one-to-one discussions, or even developing I don't know if the universities still have them, but there was an option within our the university I taught at in Florida to build a LibGuide through the library that you can upload resources that are permanent within the library's connections. And it is called LibGuide, LibGuides. And you develop it with a librarian, a friendly librarian, and you can hook videos to it. You can hook articles to it. You can hook research to it. You can hook whatever to this LibGuide, and then it remains as a opportunity for people to look through it whenever they need to refer to it. So that could be part of the monthly newsletters archive, or part of the intermittent professional development series archive. Some of the resources that might help is looking at pacer.org. They have a magnificent section on the accommodations that are typically used in higher education, which are different than some accommodations that are permitted in when we're talking about K-12 education. In particular, when we talk about CTE programs, the accommodations for assessment are very different in that realm of higher ed than they are in a accessibility center administering extended time for an exam or a quiz, which is what we're used to in higher ed. The Bergstahler book, again, talks about spending time explaining appropriate communication strategies with faculty and staff. That it was an interesting read, pages 10 and 11, saying that if the faculty member and the program member don't start off on a positive communication strategies, then somebody's going to shut down their listening or shut down their interpretation of whatever is being presented, and you're not going to get them to make any changes. So learning how to talk to different people about what they're doing or how they teach is a really important third step of the awareness process. And last of all, if you go to the Think College website, there is a video that's called "We Can Get There From Here." That is a great video that has faculty from different universities and colleges and programs talking about their experiences with teaching students with disabilities, with IDD in particular. I would recommend it as part of a professional development process. It's a short video, you know, they're high quality stuff because it's a high quality organization. Any questions before I leave the topic of awareness? And yes, I grew up in the Northeast, so I talk fast. I'm sorry.
No questions right now.
Okie dokie, thank you. So let me click on, there we go. All right, instructional practices. So that's the second area that of the toolkit. I have to tell you this story because I'm not used to writing references for source material that's from the 1980s. But this one is probably the best piece of information I ever learned all along the way of in my instructional life. And it truly comes from special education. It's not anywhere, it's not higher ed, it's just special ed. So in the 1980s, 1970s, and 80s, we were beginning to think about how to do inclusion much more effectively in K-12 settings. And Regal and Matthew did a study of effective inclusion programs. And one of the effective inclusion programs that they reviewed and gave high marks to was called the Model Resource Room Project. And this piece of this table comes from the Model Resource Room Project analysis. And what they talked about is that the best way to work with including students with disabilities into a content area teacher's class was to look at where that content area teacher is at the current moment. How do they teach their content? What information sources do they make the most use out of? And so that list there under information sources should be prioritized for each teacher. Is the textbook the top one, or is it media and discussion that is the top one? So you reorder that list based on an interview with the instructor that you're going to place that student, where you're going to place that student. So then you look at, so we go from information sources to structure. How does the teacher conduct their class? How does the faculty member conduct their classes? Is it mostly teacher directed? Is it independent study and they come back in and report, blah, 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 blah. Again, reordering it for what's most significant for each of those instructors. The third area, I gotta move my little thing over here, is the test format. How do they evaluate students? Do they give written test, oral test, short answer, matching? Do they do calculation? Reordering it for the ones that are the highest priority. This is all important when we go to the next step of instructional practices. And then the assignments, looking at what assignments are typically covered in that class, putting them in order again. So now once I have a picture of how that faculty member teaches, the next thing I do is I look at each student who's going to be moving to that classroom, taking a class with that instructor, and figure out which ones do they have facility with. And they may not have any facility or may not know how to be effective lecture note taker, or they may be really stinky at reading a textbook. So the goal then of the program is to work with the student to provide the strategies for how they're going to work with that instructor. So if in my classroom, I primarily require students to read the textbook and then discuss it with us in class. But you know that you're going to place a student in my classroom who really stinks at reading the textbook, is not reading on that grade level, then the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to provide that student a strategy for how to read the text in my class. And you're going to then provide the student a strategy for how you're going to handle the discussions in my class. Because you know from talking with the faculty member that those are important information sources. And you know from working with the student that those are the areas where they don't crisscross. they don't match up. So the same thing could be done. I'm sure you figured this out now. The same thing could be done with the test format or the assignments or the structure. I look at what the teacher, what the instructor, the faculty member is doing most frequently, and then think about the student who would be there in that classroom, and then what strategies is that student going to need to be successful. It's almost like, dare I say it, an IEP for that one class. It's an accommodation, a set of accommodation strategies for that one class. Now, the good thing about this is that rarely do faculty members change in the way that they teach. You know, I know, you've had faculty that had the same overheads from the time they started teaching till the time they retired. And so we know they just don't change. So once you do this with a faculty member, it's not going to be something that you have to do every semester for every student. You're going to get a real feel for the instructor, and you're going to be able to figure out how to provide the kinds of supports that work in that setting. So is that clear as mud for you all? There's a chat thingy. Christine knows the Regal and Matthew thing. Good for you. All right. So this is a gift from Gwen. She loaned me this. So at FAU, the students who are included in a regular program, a regular curriculum class, all have, I believe all of them do, right, Gwen? They have a contract, a learning contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is sort of like Gwen's and FAU's, but not quite. I modified some of the things that are up here for directions for students and for faculty. But once we've done that little Regal and Matthew sort of model resource room analysis, then you can easily develop the course objectives, or you can sort of easily develop the course objectives, and you can think up how will the students meet those objectives. The second column, the column over here, with some of the accommodations that you've identified from the discussion with the faculty member. When I was at FAU and we were developing this model, both Gwen and I talked about the fact that it need not be a dissertation, that it needed to be a one-page thing with minimal number of objectives. Of course, we only have one here. It's in two parts. God only knows why I didn't want to number correctly, but it should not be 20 objectives. That doesn't serve anyone for the purposes of learning the material. That you can have more accommodations or modifications, but minimizing the number of objectives. How's that sit with you? Are we good on that?
And that's for like auditing classes.
Say that again.
Would that be for students who audit the classes?
So yes, for auditing the classes as well. And I believe Gwen will give me that, give me a yes indeed, that the students, whether they're getting it, taking it for a grade or whether they are auditing it, they have learning contracts that look similar to this, that had ways that they would meet the objective and modifications and resources that they might use. True, Gwen?
True. Everyone has a learning contract who is in a general classroom. The students who take a grade for class, theirs is much more involved and much closer to the actual syllabus because they need to do everything, but they might present it in a different fashion, but they still need to meet the objectives. The audited classes, they're modified as much as needed to be for the student.
Good question, Amanda. I guess that was Amanda. I can't see who it was. It sounded like Amanda.
Yeah, I think we use a similar thing for the students when they audit the classes, but I don't know that I guess maybe that's a question for the 4 credit classes, the willingness of the faculty to make such modifications. I think when our students audit, so they are much more like willing to change how they do things.
I would imagine you're exactly right, that for the auditing, you relieve a lot of distress from the faculty member by saying, so no, they're not going to be doing all the assignments they're going to be doing, they can be doing these, but engaging in the process of interviewing the faculty member about how they teach and how the students will meet those priorities minimizes some of the faculty distress that they are watering down the content and making it not equivalent, or I don't even want to think it's that we're looking for equivalency or parity, but we're looking at a fair adaptation of the class or modification of the class. That's a good question, and you would have to see how many of them are going to play that game with you. Okay, can I go on? Yep. There we go. All right, so I alluded to this before, that there are differences in the world of CTE versus academic classes in colleges and universities. And there's not a lot of information out there about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, other than once you're in a CTE class there, it'll tell you that you can modify or accommodate, I should say, the coursework, and that's permissible. However, during testing, any accommodations are minimal, and it might only be that you're allowed to break up the testing sessions, that they don't have to do the test all in one sitting for the CTE course completion. They might be able to do it in chunks, but other than that, there may not be any modifications. So I started looking around for what did they talk about as far as accommodations in other places, and I found an online resource from the Humble Independent School District in Texas, and on the handout there is a link to this career technical education accommodation manual. It goes through the legal aspects of what you are permitted to accommodate and what you are not permitted to accommodate. And then it suggests specific or disability specific accommodations and modifications. And then the best part, the part that I thought was most useful, because we all know these specific accommodations, but the accommodations for environments. And I hadn't thought about some of the environmental accommodations that might be useful. So if you're in a program where you're doing CTE coursework, this is a resource that you can go to that has some justification. Yeah, it's Texas, it's not Florida, but that doesn't matter. The CTE coursework is universal for the most part. Okay. So my intent in completing the faculty toolbook is to talk with faculty members and program developers within different programs. And I'm going to spend time talking with folks who are in CTE programs and find out what they are permitted to do as far as the accommodations for testing as well as for coursework. So more for that later. Right. I'm going to go back to the, I'm going to go back into the way back again machine and put you in the context of beginning an inclusive education program for K-12 settings. When we did that back in the 80s, we looked at the very bestest shining models of the collaborative spirit in a faculty member. So we looked at the best 4th grade teacher or the best 7th grade science teacher that we had at our school. And that was the person that we approached to work with for including students with disabilities for the very first time. We picked only the best. I want you to think about that idea and applying it to higher education. Not looking for the the crustiest, curmudgeonliest, if that's a word, faculty member in the program to engage in collaborative experiences as your first choice. You're going to get to them eventually, but as your first choice, not a great idea. Try the one who's the most receptive. My experience, direct experiences with the FAU program, and so I'm going to go back to one experience that Gwen and I had with a faculty member that she approached who knew theater was going to be like the faculty member who taught in the Honors College for theater was going to be like the first jumper honor to join the program and provide a place for one of our students to go. But it truly it was. And in conversations that Gwen had with the faculty member, she learned that the faculty member's spouse was a special ed teacher and taught IDD students, and he already had a feel for it. Yeah, sure, bring him on in. So he was like the best shining example, and that's who she went with first, or one of the first tries, to get into the academy corral of faculty members who were willing to host a student. Can you think, Gwen, can you think of any other shining examples that would make my point?
So I can, even before I thought of the gentleman who you're discussing, the first person that popped into my head when you started your conversation about the shining star was the department head for science in the Honors College, who not only has taught multiple classes and been a peer mentor, but on the side has taken on a student or two as his own project, his own friend.
Right. Good example. And who knows where they come from, but finding that shiny example or that one that you think you can work with to maximize the positive outcomes is a really important first step in developing an instructional relationship with them. They in turn will take the coaching that you might provide it much more easily, so now I've got my shining examples and I'm going to talk to them about real special education methods that might work in their classroom. And we have to remember that they're not special ed teachers. They're not even teachers. They're, in our case, they're university faculty members who are content experts and researchers. So they're not going to know how to effectively teach. They're not going to know that language. They're not going to have that background. So I picked 4 things that are universal across the board to talk about as far as basic instructional practices that they could buy into. And the first one is task analyzing. And we task analyze as special ed teachers or special ed faculty, we task analyze the crap out of everything. Peanut butter jelly sandwiches, but that's not really important. It's making sure that when they give examples of an assignment that the students are supposed to accomplish, have they put the things in order? And that's where you as a program support may be able to help them. You can also provide them direction or examples of how to task analyze from different special ed resources, like clipping an example of what a task analysis might look like. I listed all over here on the right-hand side, excerpt from the Wayman and Cagle book on prompts and advanced organizers. And so we know these things as special education people. We know that we start with the least and move to the most obvious types of prompts. They might not know those words, but we can give them these examples, or we can give them coaching on how to use these to prompt students to participate or prompt students within their classroom. And it's not like they have to prompt all the time for everything, but the ability to know how to use some of these are useful not only for special ed students, but for the students without disabilities. There are kids within the Honors College classroom programs that we worked with in Jupiter who needed help in figuring out how to respond in a discussion group. And some of these prompting or modeling or gesturing devices are useful for them as well. Getting that point across to the faculty members is incredibly important. So another link that I want to point you to is the one that's at the bottom of the screen here. It says more methods, less madness. And it's at this location, kpcrossacademy.org, and K Patricia Cross Academy has a video library that's free to access. They are teaching and study strategies that come in like 3-minute, 4-minute examples of how to do lecture pause, how to do 2-column notes, how to do flashcards. And it's all stuff that we know from teaching social study skills, but that may not be, it may not be a clear connect for content experts. So using these as part of a professional development laboratory or a professional development resource page or whatever you call it can be useful for supporting faculty for instruction. And I skipped over teach and practice self-determination because I wanted to pull it together with, as the last point, this should be reversed. So in most of these post-secondary programs, we are talking about having the students make their own decisions, and the language that we use to promote choice sometimes can be coached with regular content area faculty. So we sometimes just like to solve the problems for the students, but if we're going to teach and practice self-determination, we need to stop and say, well, what options do you have to solve this problem? What choices do you have? What's your plan? And just coaching the faculty member on using those terms go a long way to getting not only the students in an IHE program for IDD, but also students with other types of disabilities and students without disabilities to be much more self-determined. Lord knows that college students like to have other people make their decisions, solve their problems for them. They're just like anybody else. So teaching or coaching, I don't want to say teaching, it's coaching the content area faculty to practice self-determination helps the non-disabled students as well. Any questions before I move to the next one? Are you buying this?
Nothing, no questions yet.
So Janice, they must be buying this hook, line, and sinker.
I think it's making sense and you're allowing people to ask questions and make comments along the way. So you're doing great.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the reinforcement. So I'm going to talk about the third element of the faculty toolbook and or toolkit, which is the universal design. It's a hot topic. Universal design for learning can be found outside of the special ed world. It's found in assistive technology. It's found in education for senior citizens. It's found everywhere that you can. Everywhere you can't shake a stick without knocking over some universal design. The first place that I would go to is to look at the cast.org excuse me, website. They redesigned their website. It really irritated me. But you need to find this UDL at a glance, excuse me, page once you get to the CAST website, and it'll take you to the overview video. If you're not familiar with Universal Design for Learning, the 2-cent summary of it says is that when we learn, when we teach, it's much more effective to teach by presenting options or multiple means of learning. So we look for multiple means of engagement, of representation, and action. Why is that twice? Who knows? Action. So meaning multiple means of how we present it. That should be presentation, not engagement. Representation, how they how students integrate it, and action or engagement is how they demonstrate mastery. So this video at the UDL, at the CAST website, UDL at a glance, explains each and every step along the way, and it gives you examples. Better than that, so this is for general universal design for learning. Better than that is to go to College Star, and there's the URL for it. It takes the idea of universal design for learning and applies it to college settings, yippee skippy. So there under instructional supports, you'll see different ways at the college level to do representation, engagement, and action. Okay, there's little videos, there's resources, there's and then there's student supports. It's all kinds of cool stuff. I'm not gonna belabor the point, but I'd say go here and look, mess around with it, find some resources that work for you. Again, using it as material for professional development is a useful outcome. And this is the book that I was trying to show you before, Ineffectively, is the Burke-Stoller Creating Inclusive Opportunities in Higher Education. There's the ISBN number, and you can pick it up at your favorite Amazon bookstore. Let me go to the next slide. Oh, I'm going to go back to that slide. Any other questions or thoughts on universal design or that topic, accessibility?
No questions posted, and people don't be shy.
Well, the next one's going to separate the men from the boys, or the girls from the women. So this is where I need you to tell me what kinds of things you're looking for when you think about support for faculty and staff. Right, so there's my non-university email. This is the email that I use when I'm talking to real people, not university people. No, I mean real people like my friends. So you are welcome to do that. But can we talk now a bit about what it is that you're looking for? And I want to unshare my screen if I can figure out how to do that. Stop sharing. There it is. All right. So now I can see your faces or your check mark or your name blobs, and I can see the screen, the chat box. Unmute yourself and talk to me about topics or things that you need. Amanda, do you have any?
You probably know that I do.
I know that you do, because last time we were together,
Yes.
you and Tara and I spent time talking about this. And so some of your ideas, did you notice some of your ideas are meshed into this?
Thank you for putting on the presentation. I think just like Danny, it's like we're anxious to be like, oh, what will happen? So yeah, thank you for putting together a lot of the research and presentation. And even in our like earlier planning meeting, going over some of our goals, it's like, the faculty buy-in and faculty support. So, we were thinking maybe this can tie into it of doing like, we have hosted trainings for faculty, but they're not mandatory. So it's just like whoever shows up, which is often the people who already know about us. So if we do have like new faculty, can we like create like a Canvas module that they can take it on their own, or like have that resource already available where they don't have to like come at a certain time, or I guess just like more on demand resources for them.
Right. So, I remember back when I taught in junior high, and we were doing inclusion, I had my favorite science teacher that I did co-teaching with, and I made her bring someone from her department to one of our little get-togethers that we had after school. So maybe you can, and that person we then indoctrinated to accept more readily some of our students into her classes. So maybe that's a tactic or a version of that tactic that you could take by having the people who already know about the program to bring a friend. I see that all the time. Oh, bring a friend and let's all talk. So that might be a strategy. It might be, I don't know. I'll get back to you on that one. If you try it, let me know. And does it work that they brought somebody along and that now that somebody is also interested in, working or helping include other students in their program? Don't know.
Mary Lou, this is Chris.
Hey,
I
Chris.
remember faculty asking us and being very, very concerned about liability issues. You know, what if a student is hurt while they're in my class? What, those kinds of liability and being blamed for things. And there's a lot of anxiety among faculty in that area. At least there were for us. That was our experiences. They were really anxious about that.
I understand exactly what you're saying. So remember way back at the very beginning when I was talking about the awareness part, that's part of the awareness component, that talking about how these students are alike, not disparate from the other students.
Right.
And so the idea that you have a panel of experts who are talking about the things that they have as goals and aspirations, and you have a panel of people without disabilities talking about their goals and aspirations and highlighting the fact that they're very similar. Then you can branch off to the idea that what's your anxiety level about another person without a disability getting hurt in that class? But I understand exactly what you're saying, because it is something that you have to deal with, the idea that, oh my God, they could poke themselves with a pencil or something. Well, yeah, that could happen. And what will we do if a kiddo from the honors college poked themselves with a pencil? Because that could happen too. And so, you know, you just making the connection between how alike they are to other students, other college students, their age. We're not talking about mental level or cognitive level, we're talking about their age. So that's a way to start that whole discussion. That would be my direction to take it.
Yeah, there's another question here, the importance of incorporating schools administration into UDL theory.
So Ada, are you talking about their acceptance of the use of assistive technology?
Yes, absolutely. The acceptance, and also to assist with opening up the minds of teachers. We are in an all-inclusive program. Our campus is all-inclusive. So you have teachers who are open to UDL, which is, it's common to find, and teachers who are not open to UDL.
Sure.
So when you incorporate, you get the support of your administration, and our administration is amazing with that. And they allow us to do in-house trainings as far as UDL goes, et cetera, accommodations. That is a lot of help. That's really helpful to incorporate the rest of the teachers or staff, not just teachers, but staff, into the mind of,
Right.
or the mindset of UDL.
You're exactly right. One of the experiences that I had very early on was there were students without disabilities in the health. What's the course called? Health and personal something or other. What is it?
Health and Fitness for Life.
There you go. Health and Fitness for Life. And I was in the classroom with the instructor on the first day that he was giving a quiz. And I was trying to help him understand the idea that some of the students knew how to use a piece of assistive technology called Natural Reader to read PDFs for them on their laptop. And that this one student in particular was very good at using that, and that was how she wanted to have her quiz read to her. And so I asked him, would it be okay if I explain this to the whole class? And there were students there without disabilities. And so I did a guest shot. Hey, jumped in there and said, let me show you a really cool piece of technology that you can use to listen to written or PDF text, basically, that you don't have to spend all your energy on decoding it and reading for comprehension. You can just listen to it. Okay. So I showed it to them, and they were all shaking their head. Okay, cool. One or two of the students in the class came up to me later and said, I don't care about what we learned in the class. That and you explaining how to use Google Scholar was worth the money of tuition. Now, these were kids who were disgustingly normal. They had no disabilities at all, but I was showing them universal design for learning adaptations that they could use. They bought into it. And then it went back to the department chair. The instructor carried it back to the department chair and said, you know what Duffy did in class? And he explained about Natural Reader and Google Scholar. And he was, hey, this is cool. This is a great idea. We should use this more frequently. Will you write this down and share it with me? You bet. So quick, send an email to the department chair. And now that one instance snowballed into a department having access to this UDL. And it was only because someone, a shining example, a shining collaborator, chose to share it with other people, and that connection was really important. But I understand what you're saying, that it's imperative that you get the administration to buy in to the use of UDL. Making use of your accessibility services is another place that can help you with the acceptance of assistive technology and UDL principles. That was a
Mary Lou,
long-winded answer.
Okay. Mary Lou, can you post your PowerPoint in the chat room? And
If I knew how.
You can send it to us.
Okay.
And we will send it out or post it in the handout, the document section in Hoover, so that we can make sure everybody has it. And we do have a couple of other questions while you're thinking, using your hands.
Okay. I mean, you see exactly what I mean.
Do programs have a designated faculty who trains or works with other faculty? Or does that role go to the program coordinator or disability service office?
I think the answer is yes and no.
Yes.
For both of those questions. It varies, Amanda, by program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and each institution usually, and Mary Lou mentioned it earlier, has a faculty development office that provides training along with the Disability Resource Center, Accessibility Center. So it should be something already established at the institution who provides, does that kind of training to faculty.
Right, they could have a center for teaching and learning.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't think of it. And I think connecting with them would certainly be a great way to integrate within the institution and having them be responsible,
right,
for helping with that.
In our case at Robert Morgan, we're a technical college. We're part of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, so we don't have, all those services. So basically, and it's only based Dr. Vieta and myself. So we are the ones who will do in-house training during staff meetings, or we will do it during PD days.
Yeah, spread the love.
It's probably even more important for you all to develop an archive or a location. Whether Amanda mentioned it within Canvas, and then I mentioned using LibGuides through the libraries, but somewhere that's a permanent repository or a permanent archive or whatever that you can share on the fly with faculty who are new, coming in and going out, or changing at the end of the semester.
Okay, great thoughts. We are looking forward to it. We hope by the end of this academic year that we'll have both the Family Toolkit and the Faculty Toolkit up on our website. We are seriously working to get them in formats where everybody can use them. So, and I know Mary Lou wants to get a little more input from you guys.
Yep.
Before she finalizes it. So that's going to be a great help. And I think seeing that information about the career technical education centers and technical colleges. I think that's a very great resource. Actually, all of them are. And helping people know where to start and go. So we have 2 more minutes, and I know folks are getting ready to get back to their teams, and we'll hope to see everybody back this afternoon for our sessions this afternoon.